Welcome to the NatRefs Show, a weekly global podcast on sustainable cooling and heating technologies, brought to you by Shecco and supported by Teco. My name's Andrew Williams, and I'll be hosting today's show from Brussels, Belgium. I'm the European editor of Shecco's industry-leading websites r744.com, hydrocarbons21.com and ammonia21.com. I'm also the editor of Accelerate Europe and Accelerate Australia and New Zealand magazines. I'm joined today by my colleague in the US, Michael Garry, my colleague in Europe, Charlotte McLaughlin, and my colleague in the Asia Pacific, Devin Yoshimoto. This week, we'll discuss Panasonic's CO2 outdoor condensing units on the European market and the policy situation surrounding HFCs in the United States. We'll also look at some of the highlights of the upcoming issue of Accelerate Europe. Now over to Devin, who'll give us the lowdown on the Panasonic story.
Hi, Andrew. It's good to be with you today. I just want to give you a quick update on a story that I was working on this week. And I've been in touch with a representative from Panasonic who gave us a little bit of update on how sales are going for their CO2 condensing units in Europe. So as you know, Panasonic has been working with CO2 for outdoor condensing units for a long time here in Japan. And since last summer, they've launched their outdoor condensing units for the European market. So this is it's really, really significant. Panasonic has decided to enter and compete in the market for CO2-based small format CO2 condensing unit systems in Europe. This is for convenience stores. This can be for gas stations with their small cold storage rooms, or it could be for smaller supermarkets. And the 2 horsepower unit is available now. It's selling now, and Panasonic told us that they've sold about 200 units so far since summertime. So a really good sign. And one of the things that the representative told us was that he attributes these sales basically to HFC prices rising. And we've been following this pretty closely at Shecco, that HFC prices like for R404, 410A are going up very rapidly because of the F-gas regulation in Europe. So it's a big opportunity for Panasonic to introduce their CO2 systems. And one of the other interesting things, too, was we asked Panasonic, how has this launch compared to when they launched the outdoor condensing units for CO2 in Japan? And what he told us was that it's actually been going a lot faster. The rate of sales and the interest they've seen is expected to outpace what they've seen here in Japan. And what they attribute it to is the F-gas regulation, but also because of the relatively higher level of experience for technicians in Europe with CO2 technology.
Okay, right. And indeed, the F-gas regulation is driving uptake of natural refrigerant solutions in a variety of applications, and particularly in the sort of food retail, petrol stations type market that these condensing units are particularly suited to. I think the sales numbers of the 2 horsepower unit have been quite impressive, right, for the first year.
Yeah, they're pretty happy with it, and it's leading up to the second part of the story that we wrote this week, is that they're going to be launching the 10 horsepower unit now this summertime in Europe for the European market. So, they've identified their distributors and they're working with them very closely, and it's something that they're also looking forward to as well. And it's just sort of a sign too that the interest in alternative refrigerant technologies is growing everywhere. I mean, we were just together in Australia at the ARBS exhibition, and we talked to Inderpal Sand, who's from BayRef, where they just launched the SCM Frigo Cubo 2 condensing unit in Australia for small formats. And he told us there too that generally around the world they're seeing more interest in CO2-based technology for small format applications. And so this is just another sign that Panasonic sees that too. This is part of their overall strategy, which we also heard from Shigeru Dono, who is the managing director of the food retail equipment business division at Atmosphere Japan, where he told us that they're trying to create a CO2 family, is what his quote was. And this small format outdoor condensing unit launching in Europe, first 2 horsepower last year and 10 horsepower coming up this summer, is part of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think after Europe, they're also going to be targeting other parts of the world beyond Japan, right?
Yeah, we've been following this very closely in Australia. They've told us that they are planning to launch the condensing units in Australia very soon. I believe that's going to be this year, 2018. And as you might have seen in our Accelerate China magazines, we've visited the Panasonic factory in China. And when we were at China Refrigeration, we saw the launch of Panasonic's first transcritical CO2 rack system for larger applications. So they're really branching out, and they're really showing that CO2 is a core part of their strategy for their food retail equipment business.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Devin. Certainly interesting to see how some of the success that Panasonic has had in Japan is now coming to other parts of the world. Staying in Europe, we're looking forward to publishing the next issue of Accelerate Europe magazine later this month. Among the highlights of that magazine are Heineken. The cover story is going to be Heineken. I was there in Amsterdam last week to meet the people in charge of Heineken's refrigeration strategy, and we certainly heard some interesting things about what they're doing with natural refrigerant.
Yeah. For Heineken, they're one of the biggest, most recognizable brand names in the world. And it was really interesting that you actually got to go down to headquarters and talk to the people in charge of their refrigeration equipment. What did they say about natural refrigerants and how they're incorporating that into their overall strategy?
Yeah, so we went to the headquarters in Amsterdam, and we sat down with Graham Horton and Hans Donker. These are the two people in charge of refrigeration and cooling in general in Heineken Global Procurement. That's the department of Heineken that deals with equipment, and so fridges and draft beer equipment. Now, the policy is to move to natural refrigerants in all new beer fridges and all new draft beer equipment. So in 2017, for example, almost all of the 137,818 new fridges that Heineken bought had one or more, and in many cases all four, of these so-called green features. Heineken talks about a green fridge, and the green fridge is the use of hydrocarbon refrigerant, LED illumination, an energy management system, and energy efficient fans. So basically, Heineken is using natural refrigerants as part of a holistic strategy for improving the energy efficiency of its beer fridges.
So this is the small beer fridges that hold the bottles of Heineken, and you're saying that they've identified 4 core parts of the beer fridge: the lights, the fans, the software that manages the energy use, and then the 4th part is natural refrigerants.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a sign of that natural refrigerants being used as part of a holistic energy efficiency strategy. Now, the journey started in 2010, and it came from the top. It was the CEO who decided that Heineken would be adopting hydrocarbons for its fridges, and then 2 interviewees for the cover story were the 2 people tasked with turning that vision into a reality. So the journey began in 2010, and here we are 8 years down the line, and they told us that Heineken is effectively halfway through this process of changing the refrigerant in its beer fridges around the world to natural refrigerants. So we can expect that the company will comfortably meet its targets of switching over to 100% natural refrigerants sort of within the next 8 years or so, perhaps, should things continue at the current pace.
That's quite a statement. Heineken, one of the biggest brands in the world, is going 100% with natural refrigerants. Is that just to clarify? Is that R290 or is that R600A for these small fridges?
It's in for the small fridges. It's R290, and it's also R290 for the draft beer equipment. They have they work with beer for the fridges. They work with local fridge manufacturers to put together the fridges that are this green fridge specification that the company has asked for. And for draft beer equipment, that's proprietary. So they have their own equipment. One's called the Blade, and then there's a bigger one called the David XL. And these are the draft beer dispensers in pubs. So basically what you're looking at is a natural refrigerant portfolio for the whole world. Heineken is active in many countries around the world. It's a global brand, and obviously there are different beer brands as part of it. There's Affligem in Belgium, for example. There's Krušovice. There's Strongbow apple ciders, Bulmers ciders, and the list goes on. And the natural refrigerant strategy is for all of Heineken's beer fridges, so it's not just related, and also the draft beer dispensing unit. So it's not just about Heineken brand beer; it's all the beers in the portfolio. And the policy is all new fridges. So in terms of the progress, it's simply a life cycle thing. As the current fridges out there reach the end of their life, they're replaced with R290 based ones.
Well, and were they happy to kind of talk to us and talk to you to get this message out there? Were they excited?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, as I say, this policy comes from the top. The CEO, Jean-François Van Boxmeer, he's a part of something called the Alliance of CEO Climate Leaders. That's an informal network of leading CEOs who are committed to climate action under the umbrella of the World Economic Forum. And basically, Heineken told us they're very, very keen to demonstrate and take on the responsibility that they believe the private sector has to cut emissions and help lead the transition to a low carbon economy. And the adoption of natural refrigerants is one of the main ways that the company has identified for doing this.
Great. I'm looking forward to checking out more of that story in the magazine.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. And now then over to Michael and Charlotte, who are going to talk about the policy situation surrounding HFCs in the US. Over to you.
Well, in the United States, we're facing what I'm calling in my next cover story for Accelerate America magazine, which publishes in the next week or so, the policy quagmire, because there's a lot going on across the U.S. government that is affecting how HFCs are regulated. Of course, the big change that happened was last August when the U.S. Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., ruled that the EPA could not require companies using HFCs as a substitute for ozone-depleting gases to replace those HFCs with a more climate-friendly solution. So by limiting the EPA's authority over HFCs, this single legal ruling threw the U.S. regulatory landscape for refrigerants into disarray, creating massive uncertainty for manufacturers and many commercial and industrial end users of HVAC and R equipment that were planning to transition out of HFCs to lower GWP refrigerants, including natural refrigerants. So over the past several years, many OEMs such as Hillphoenix, True Manufacturing, and many others, as well as component makers like Danfoss, Emerson, and others, have ramped up their natural refrigerant-based technologies to serve as a substitute for HFC systems. On the basis of the EPA SNAP program, delisting and regulating these HFCs. But the Mexichem case leaves many questions now in its wake about whether and how HFCs will ultimately be regulated. And as I say, it's created like this policy quagmire in which the EPA, Congress, the White House, the Supreme Court, as well as some of the proactive states like California and New York are all trying to find their footing in order to offer clarity to the HVAC&R industry. One of the big recent developments was the EPA finally responded to the court case in late April with a notification of guidance that outlined the steps it would take, which include nullifying the EPA's Rule 20 on HFCs and initiating a notice and consent rulemaking process to revisit how to address HFC listings under the SNAP program in light of the court's opinion. On May 4th, the EPA held its first stakeholder meetings with more than 100 people attending from companies and environmental organizations. And one of the key points made at that meeting was there was almost unanimous support for the U.S. Senate to ratify the Kigali Agreement. The Kigali Agreement, of course, being the global treaty, amendment to the Montreal Protocol that lowers the phases down HFCs over the next several decades. Really, at that meeting and then in a recent letter that 30 some odd manufacturers sent to the White House, there's this tremendous groundswell of industry support for the Kigali Amendment to be ratified. The Trump administration first has to refer the treaty to the Senate for ratification. That hasn't happened yet. And, what the Trump administration will do is always kind of up in the air based on to be charitable, their checkered history with environmental regulations.
I think that's certainly true, Michael, but I think there's also a lot of positive indications that the Trump administration will ratify the treaty. I think last year we heard from a spokesperson that they're going to look at the ramifications of what Kigali means for the business interests. The report that they published a few weeks ago was very positive on the business case for ratifying Kigali. I saw yesterday that the UN Environment Chief Eric Solheim released a statement that said that he believes that the US, along with China and India, will ratify the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. And he said in an interview that the United States will ratify the Kigali Amendment because of the interest from American business. So I think a lot of people are positive because it will help American business that they will ratify Kigali. Right.
That's a great point, Charlotte. I think that there is a lot to be said for that argument. The business community is really unanimous in its desire for this, but as somebody who's been living through the Trump administration for the past 15 months, I have to say that it's hard not to be a little bit cynical about what they're going to do. When it comes to environmental policy, they have been pretty adamantly against anything that smacks of addressing climate change. And since Kigali, in trying to phase down HFCs, they're doing it because it's a potent global warmer. And, once the Trump administration grasps that aspect, it concerns me that they will, as they have with the Paris Accord, as they have with many other Obama administration measures to address climate change, they will just simply oppose it, in spite of the need by the business community. Sometimes, as we're seeing with these trade tariffs and so on, that they don't always, the Trump administration doesn't always do what's seemingly in the long-term best interests of the business community. So I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it. I hope it happens. I think it has a good chance to happen. But until it does, the history of this is really quite quite nerve-wracking from the perspective of someone in the United States who cares about the environment. And of course, there are other things going on the policy front of great significance, and that's on the state level, particularly in California, where Senator Lara introduced this year the California Cooling Act, which offers financial incentives to end users who install natural refrigerant equipment. That's part of California's effort to regulate HFCs. They've adopted already the SNAP program for many applications. In California, their Air Resources Board is moving forward with a program to cap GWPs of refrigerants at a very low level. So, California is moving forward, and the concern, of course, is that with California taking its own measures, that there's going to be a patchwork of state level regulations that will bring even more uncertainty and confusion to the landscape, in the absence of a federal program like the SNAP program. So it's just a real chaotic situation right now in the U.S. Next on June 12th, as many of our listeners know, the shecco is going to be holding its Atmosphere America conference in Long Beach, California. And we're privileged to have as one of our keynote speakers Senator Lara, who will be speaking about the California Cooling Act. We encourage folks in the U.S., particularly in California, it's still time to register for the event online and the Atmosphere America website. And we're also going to hear from the folks from the California Air Resources Board, CARB, who will give us an update on what they're doing with respect to HFC regulation. So it's going to be, very much focused on the policy landscape in California and nationally. So I'm looking very much forward to that. There'll be an opportunity really for everybody involved in the HVAC and R business who are interested in natural refrigerants to actually influence, to speak to and influence these policymakers about what ultimately happens with their program. So it's really a unique opportunity, and I encourage our listeners to come to the event if possible. So I'll turn it back over to you, Charlotte.
All right, thanks very much, Michael. So there's just like a quick update we have. So last year we talked about how Hillphoenix, a leading refrigeration systems manufacturer in the US, has the largest amount of Greenchill certified stores last year. And it's just sort of like an update on that, basically. So Hillphoenix has 87% of the total number of Greenchill certified stores last year. And these include platinum and gold and silver levels. But I think a lot of them are because Hillphoenix has been working with natural refrigerants for a long time in the US. And they've been working with, for example, Aldi on these platinum stores that are using just natural refrigerants. It's really like, I think it just shows like another example of how Hillphoenix is being ordered as like an innovator in this industry, pushing natural refrigerant technology in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. Greenchill gave them an award last fall for having the highest number of as a manufacturer of equipment in Greenchill certified stores. They have been one of the leading OEMs in the United States in terms of natural refrigerant development and manufacturing and installations. We gave them Shecco, that is Accelerate America, gave Hillphoenix an award last year for its Advancer Flex system, which is a downsized version of its traditional Advancer booster transcritical CO2 system. It's for smaller format stores like Aldi, and Aldi is in fact used it extensively in many of its stores. Aldi has over 100 stores with transcritical CO2 equipment, the leading end user in the U.S., and many of those systems use the Hillphoenix equipment. Many of them are Greenchill certified. So really kudos to Hillphoenix. They really have had a lot of success and pointed the way for many of the OEMs to follow suit with the CO2 equipment and other natural refrigerant equipment in the U.S. as well as Canada.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks very much, Michael.